Yvonne Max, and I am the founder and chair of the channel community and the founder and CEO of Co-Cheer, a coaching and consulting practice, and also a channel community gold supporter. Welcome to the next episode of Smashing the Class Ceiling. In this series, I will be interviewing and showcasing some of the fantastic individuals that we have in the channel who have all come from a low socio-economic background, but have gone on to build incredibly successful careers. They will be sharing their stories of how they've navigated the corporate corridors and smashed through that class ceiling. So without delay, I would like to welcome my very next guest, Mark Ash. So Mark is the Chief Revenue Officer and Executive Board Member at Konica Minolta. Thank you so much, Mark, for agreeing to come on the show and share your story with us.
Thank you very much for the invite. It's a privilege, and I don't think I've ever been described as a fantastic person before. So I think we can call it a wrap and quit.
Oh, bless you. No, you're not getting away that easy. I know you've got a great story and I want everybody to hear it. So obviously, Mark, we've met a few years ago while I was still in the world of corporate, but it was only very recently when I posted something on social media that you commented around the fact that I then understood that we actually have quite similar backgrounds. I think it was something about social mobility. But we've obviously never had the opportunity to discuss it before, and I have no idea about your background. So please tell me about where you grew up and talk to me about your early career.
More than happy to do that. So I grew up on the beautiful Isle of Wight. Well, I say it's beautiful, but I think now I'm fully grown and the sun is shining and it's a lovely hot day when we'd probably all rather be by the beach. Less beautiful when it's cold, wet, and you're a teenager that's separated from the bright lights of the mainland by the world's most expensive ferry. I had an interesting childhood. Obviously, the title of this podcast alludes to it, but I was part of a broken family. Both of my parents had been married 3 or 4 times each. Grew up in a small council house overflowing with siblings, half stepchildren, etc. And the key challenge for us then was that money was tight, and that led to a lot of tension. And it's a reason why I was kicked out of home when I was young, whilst just starting sixth form, and then I had to effectively go and live in a bedsit. And I learned something on there that was quite interesting, that if you're unemployed, the government look after you. Maybe not as well as you'd like, but they look after you. If you're in education, they don't. So I had to get a full-time job or a part-time job doing a lot of hours whilst I was at school, because it was the only way that I could fund myself to live whilst in the bedsit and do my A-levels. In fact, I ended up doing 3 jobs at one time. So that was a bit of a challenge. And I think one of the key things that I learned really at that time is that if you have a strong work ethic, you can succeed. And that work ethic really took me into my early career and really helped me progress throughout it.
No, so that's really fascinating. So the fact that you had to move out of home, you're still in education and you're having to work all these jobs. This is where the system is well and truly broken, and it doesn't take into consideration different people's needs at certain stages of their life. So all credit to you, Mark, for doing those jobs. What were those jobs? What was it? Talk to me, tell me about some of these first jobs that you did.
What were those jobs? I actually started as a really young kid delivering leaflets, because that's the first thing you could do for cash in hand. Paper round, kitchen porter, hotel porter, lugging luggage. I thought that would give me some big guns. It didn't quite work out that way. And then when I suppose my formal career after temping, I'd left university. I got to university. After 1 year, I left, and then I started really at the bottom of the ladder, filling photocopiers with paper, cleaning the glass, and really doing basic work. I worked nights, delivering pizzas, making pizzas, working in takeaway places, and I think actually all of those roles I didn't realize at the time were teaching me something. And we had a brief chat off camera before we started this, saying you don't know what you don't know. But of course, when you're doing those roles, you learn a lot of things. And if you're delivering pizza, it might seem like an innocuous job. You turn up to a burly doorman's house with the pizza an hour late on a Friday night when they're waiting to go out, you'll see what dealing with an angry customer means. Conversely, if you're dealing with a lot of cash and and there's no one else in the business, then again, you have to learn trust and accountability. So I think I did a lot of what I thought at the time were were menial, low-paid jobs, but what I didn't realize was all of these jobs were teaching me something, and the more jobs I did, the more I earned.
Yeah, I mean, life experience as well. Like, I think people don't appreciate how valuable those skills are and how transferable they are throughout your whole career and your whole life. And I think that is one of the things that, coming from our upbringing, has an advantage because you have to do it. There's no choice. So
Correct.
you have to learn to survive or to have money. There's no like bank of mum and dad there giving you a load of free cash or anything like that. So it was not a choice for us, but it was something that did teach you a lot in terms of the work ethic that you mentioned, but also how to survive.
I think I'm just going to pick up on a point you made there because I think there's a nuance to it, Yvonne. I think the point is if we wanted money, we had to work hard. But one of the things that I learned in one of my first jobs is how hard you worked, how many hours you worked, how many jobs you worked. That was the choice. And what I found is there was a lot of people that were quite happy to complain about the things they didn't have and talk about the things that they, but when the opportunity to work harder, which is really the only thing you can control, if you don't have the skills and the knowledge to market and sell, the only really thing you've got is how many hours you work. And I found that a lot of people didn't have that work ethic
Yeah.
to actually get on and earn more money, irrespective of bettering themselves, developing themselves, or progressing. I think there's a lot of people out there that didn't have that work ethic.
Yeah.
And one thing that wasn't apparent to me at the time is if you are a hard worker that will turn up at the drop of the hat, that will help others in a time of need, you are more marketable by that fact alone, and therefore of value to your employer or employers. And that now as an employer, it's second nature. But at that time, I didn't realize that that in itself is a value that you can sell.
No, absolutely. I mean, my first job, my first full-time job was YTS, and I was getting paid £35 a week to do a full-time job in an office. And because it didn't pay me very well, I used to bike every night after my full-time job and do a 2-hour cleaning job. And then I'd do another cleaning job on a
Yeah,
Sunday, and I'd earn just as much money doing those two part-time jobs than I did for the full-time job. It's
100%.
nuts.
And
But
we were the fittest people as well because we had to bike and we had to walk everywhere.
absolutely. Yeah. I think people have it way too easy now. So
Oh.
how did you get into the channel then, Mark?
I was temping nights. One of the worst thing I've ever done. Anybody that works a night job has got my utmost respect, particularly this time of the year. And I was temping at Virgin Atlantic for Xerox, the document company. And what happened is they saw how hard I was working, how conscientious I was, all the things that you learn when you're young, and the hidden curriculum, i.e., it's not part of the formal agenda at school, but you typically learn from your parents and others. Being punctual, being polite, well mannered, work ethic. So I worked really hard, and they said we need to hire this guy, and they effectively brought me in as a pool manager. And again, as I talked about earlier, the fact that I would do anything for anyone at the drop of the hat immediately differentiated me from a lot of the people who that was their career, that was their life, and they had been a bit worn down by it.
Yeah.
So they really kind of brought me into it. And I worked through a number of different jobs, progressed rather rapidly in an operational sense, working at Virgin Atlantic. And then one of the managers who had came in recognized I don't know, I don't think it's ability. I think they recognized the work ethic and the potential. They then took me with them when they moved up to head office in Uxbridge. And before I went, Richard Branson had a garden party. It's a legendary staff party. His parties, if you ever get the
Wow.
chance, are the best. Invariably, someone ends up in the pool or the river. And I met a lovely lady who's now Mrs. Ash and has been for a few decades. And I was commuting backwards and forwards up to the wilds of Norfolk where she lived and blew my car up. And I couldn't afford to replace it. And the head office job came with a company car. So that for me got me up here, but there's only a certain amount of time you can commute 6, 7, 8 hours a day, even with a strong
Yeah.
work ethic. And I looked for a job, and what I found was absolutely mind blowing. In the whole of Norfolk and Suffolk, they just didn't have any white collar work. The only non manufacturing farming work I could find. I was in the police. I applied for that. That took months and months and months, and I got worn down by the travelling. And a role came up for a funded head, which you'll know well from your corporate
Yeah.
days. And it was a A4 printer specialist role for an IT distributor called Midwich. I had no idea what it was, but it said Xerox in the title, which was the name of the printer brand. And I took it, scared me to death, and then the rest is history.
Wow. I see. I never knew that story. My husband's from Norfolk, so I can.
Ah,
Yeah. See, it's not
and he's
funny.
probably escaped then if he's got a white collar job as well.
No, he doesn't. He's a steel erector, so
He can come back. He can come
yeah, he
back.
can come back. His father still lives there, but he moved to London. I convinced him it was a bit more going on down here. So
Streets are paved with gold in London, aren't
well, yeah, it costs you more than that though to live here. That's the only sad thing. Definitely more opportunities though. So so what do you see as the biggest challenges that you faced and how have you overcome them?
It's probably not the answer that, well, actually, I'd say probably not. You may well expect this, but I think a lot of your watchers or listeners were. The biggest challenge, bar none, that underpinned most of my early career was a deep-seated lack of confidence, and at times this was crippling. It surprises a number of my team and people that I work with and coach and mentor that I was so shy I couldn't introduce myself in a team meeting. And if you asked me to stand up and present, I would have an outright panic attack. And a couple of times I've actually left the building. And again, I know that's hard to imagine now, but it came from a sense of lack of self-worth and being brought up by people that said, oh, don't try this, you'll break it. Don't do this, you'll break it. Don't try this, you'll fail. What if you get this wrong? You'll lose your job. So in my head, I had a narrative that constantly went round like a hamster wheel. And I think the key thing for me, it was really clear I wouldn't progress my career without overcoming it. And I think that really kick-started the journey of both formal development and self-development. And I distinguished between the two in that I was blessed enough that Xerox was fantastic in the 90s and early 2000s around providing formal training. I found it bizarre. A lot of people didn't take advantage of it. But then the self-development bit really kicked in with the confidence because Xerox would teach you skills you needed for the job. But I was introduced to something which is probably gone out of fashion now called NLP or neuro linguistic programming. And it's a simple technique that effectively helps you reframe things in your brain and basically rewire how your brain thinks. And to this day, I can remember sitting in a company car park up north in Livingston St Anne's, practicing the techniques because I was too scared to walk in the building and speak to their sales force. And it worked.
Yeah.
And whilst it wasn't an overnight fix, it was something that you could then practice and improve upon every day. And that for me was a pivotal moment in my whole life because then I realized that I thought I was born with a deep-seated lack of confidence and therefore that would stop me my whole life. And what I actually learned is you can rewire your brain and you can learn new skills and that can transform your life.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, NLP, I think that was one of the early coaching type methods. And it's no different in coaching. It's all about helping people identify why they feel the way they do and get them to think differently about it. Because if you can think differently about it, then you can feel differently about it. And then what you do is different. The outcome is different. And the one thing that's consistently coming up across these stories that I'm, with the people that I'm interviewing is that lack of worth, i.e. they just don't value themselves or didn't value themselves in the same way that people do that have come from a more privileged upbringing.
100%.
And we talk about imposter syndrome just associated with it being a woman or a female thing. And imposter syndrome comes from a place of being in an environment where you're the minority, and you can be in the minority from being from a low social economic background. It just because and you're even doubly impacted if you're white and you're female than you are if you're white and you're male. But it just be coming from that minority class group will give you this sense of inferiority and also the added pressure of wanting to sort of support and encourage the rest of your class, so you feel like you've got to do this for everybody else as well. So you add this extra, you're representing this whole the rest of the class group that are very similar to you, so you add this extra layer of pressure on top of it. So it's very, very common and something that's consistently coming up. But amazing what you've done on the LLP stuff, because it's so, so powerful. Your brain is like any other muscle, and it just needs literally that little bit of, and it's elastic, it's got that elasticity, and you literally just have to change how you think about it.
I agree. And it's funny, I even talk to people now when they talk about mental health, and I prefer the term mental fitness, because like you said, it's just like your muscles. If you go to the gym every day and you lift weights, your muscles get stronger. If you run every day, that you get fitter and faster. And actually, I think that your brain is a muscle, but it's a muscle that most of us don't exercise. And I just wanted to come back to the point you just made there. In all the 46 years I've had on this planet, I've never thought of myself as coming from a minority, and yet I'm part of every gender diversity and inclusion group in every business I've ever worked at. And I'm really acutely aware of how people feel and how they act, but I've never actually made that link myself. So you've just said it's common. I never even made the link myself. So I've learned something. I've learned something today in 10 minutes.
Yeah, and it was only through my own self-discovery, and again, exploring and trying to get to the bottom of why I've been held back, or why I was so affected by the class pay gap to the point of hundreds of thousands of pounds over the course of my career. And it comes down to that, just not valuing yourself in the same way.
100%.
It's literally that. And it's we just can learn so much from that. And now I have got that knowledge, I just have to share it with everybody, because it's like, well, let's not let everybody else make the same mistakes that we do, because everybody has the same rights to be in a position or earn exactly the same. We're all equals, and it's how you get them to believe in themselves the same way that we're now in that position to do so.
And that's why I'm so keen to join you today, because I think previously knowledge was power, and the knowledge was handed down or it was learned by osmosis. Now with platforms like this, if you have any form of interest on it, it's available on the internet and it's free of charge. And I think that is the piece that people look at us now. They look at you in the corporate career, they look at you as a published author, they look at me as C-level. They see the product of what we've become. They don't see the journey that we've been on to become that product. And I think that is a key window on the world that we can open to share with people.
No, absolutely. So that's your biggest challenge, and you've overcome it, which is fantastic. What has been your proudest moment of your career, and why is that?
I think I'm on the way. I'm on the way where I am now to get into the proudest moment. But I would say that the proudest is probably when we met in the joining Samsung, which is a huge B2C business. We were given the mission to turn the print business into a B2B print business. It was 83% consumer focused. So Dixon's, Argos, John Lewis would have been the big customers when I joined. And I think there have been 5 or 6 people that have been given the task to do it in 5 or 6 years. And it is a company that was so consumer orientated and seated that it was a real challenge to do it. And with a core team, we managed to turn that around and get it to be 80% B2B in the UK and Ireland. And we literally went from 0 clients to having a material presence in every single vertical, but with a really small team, and scaling that business to significant values. And I remember when we first met at Kelway and CDW and was coming in and talking to Phil, the CEO, and others. We went from being, well, you haven't heard of us as being in this marketplace 2 or 3 years ago, but our clients are now XYZ. They're all household names, FTSE 100s. And I think the ability to know that with your team, we've done that. It's not a global company or a global brand that's enabled it, or a European or an EMEA organization. It's a handful of people that have made the difference. And it was like giant killing. And I think it was also the hardest moment of my life. The work ethic came in, working incredible days, living away from home weeks at a time, being away from my family 4 or 5 days every single week for years. But actually, if you win something easy, it's like if you're a football team, if you're winning and beating someone at the bottom of the league or 2 leagues down, you don't get that sense of pride. If you knock out the biggest and the best, it's got more satisfaction for doing that.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, that's incredible. I didn't even know that story. So, and what you've achieved, you should be immensely proud. And having the right team or people around you, your tribe, is so rewarding, because you can't do it on your own. I remember
I,
feeling quite similar when Kelway was sweeping all the Cisco awards, taking them off of the BTs and the computer centres. We came out of nowhere, and that feeling like
100%.
we were the little person that came out literally from nowhere, sort of to the number one position with, with an amazing team around us that have helped us get there. But yeah, it's so rewarding.
That's exactly the same analogy, and I think also the reason why that was my most proudest moment is that's the first time I've ever taken a gamble on taking a job. Up until then, I've been asked repeatedly to take jobs and said, no, can't do that. I'm not good enough. I need to walk before I can run. And I remember someone sitting down and saying, you're not walking, you're crawling. You can run and you can run fast, take the job. And I didn't. And this was the first time I backed myself, and it scared me to death. And in that fear, in that being scared, that's where the magic happened. That's where the growth happened. And Satya Nadella talks about the growth of digital technology during COVID. I think 2 or 3 years growth in 2 or 3 months. That was how I grew, because I was exposed to so many different things at such a speed, at such a pace, in such an aggressive organization
Yeah,
that I literally learned in dog years. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think I was pretty nearly killed, but I did come out of it a massively different person. And that for me was then lived experience, which could address the confidence issue.
absolutely. And it's just testament that every one of us has done something for the first time. And we all fail at that as well. We've failed all throughout our lives, but that's just the first part of learning. And if you can fail fast and keep going and keep pushing and just get yourself back up again, dust yourself off and keep going, and face that, you utilize that fear as a positive, because people a lot of the time they use it to hold them back. It's what keeps them
Yeah.
down. But if you can get through that fear, and then you end up in the learning zone and then into the growth zone, and then great things happen, and then you just do it all again with the next skill that you're going to learn and the next job that you're going to do, or everything is learnable. I always say that,
Correct.
you can
100%.
absolutely learn everything, especially if you want to, but you have to want to do it.
I 100% agree.
I ran the marathon recently, first time, only ever doing it
Well
once.
done.
Thank you very much. And everyone says to me, I couldn't run a marathon. I said, you absolutely could. But do you want to run a marathon? That's the difference. If you want to do something, then you can achieve anything you want if you want to do it. The reason why
I,
people don't run a marathon because they don't want to run a marathon. It's got nothing
I
to do
am
with being
so
bad or
bought.
can't.
I'm so bought into that, and it's a conversation I have quite regularly. And I'll use people like you as the example, because I couldn't swim at all, and I was crap at running. Didn't enjoy running, and was never good at running. I'll be winded as a school. I was a hockey player, I was a rugby player, and that's where I got my enjoyment. And as soon as school stopped, so did that. The fascinating thing for me is through cycling, I realized I couldn't take my bike every time I went into London, every time I stayed away from home, I couldn't take my bike on the tube. And I had this downtime, and I knew the link between exercise and how I felt and how it helped my mental health as well as my physical health. And I thought I'll get into running. And I'd had a motorbike accident, my knee was damaged, and I was always told by a doctor, you can't run. And I thought, well, I can't run anyway, and my knee's there, so I can't run. And then over time, as you said, everything is teachable, everything's learnable. I just met people that had a different point of view. I met a different physio. Well, you can do that if you do X, Y, Z. And it's actually gone full circle now. So my passion outside of work and the family is triathlon. And I absolutely adore it. And I train 7 days a week. And I've had a serious accident, multiple spinal fractures, base of my spine at the top where it meets my neck. And I can't do the long distance now just from sheer pain. But I'm now running 18 and a half minute 5Ks. I couldn't do a 30-minute 5K before. I just couldn't do it. And if you had told me even 2 years ago, you will get sub 20, I would have bet you a lot of money that I couldn't. And again, that lived experience is really valuable. And I had a call with another one of our directors today who's making unbelievable progress at running. And his started off also from running a marathon. And that is, if you keep telling yourself you can't do it, you won't do it. But the minute you surround yourself with people that say you can do it, or have you tried this, or use this technique, or this nutrition, or this strength, you can do it. And that bit about everything being learnable, I think once your brain starts to realize that, you start to ask the questions, what can I do differently? What will make me achieve that objective? But you're right. If you don't have the objective and the willingness to do it, then you're right. You won't do it.
No, absolutely. And I think mindset is so powerful, and having the right attitude to do something, which is testament to why you've been so successful. So, how do you think that coming from a low socioeconomic background has impacted your career, either positively or negatively? Or both? You can say both, it's fine.
Well, I've talked about confidence for me, and that definitely stopped the velocity of it, held me back for a long, long time. And that imposter syndrome, which I know is commonplace, specifically among those from low socioeconomic backgrounds. And in fact, with my own children now, the number one thing I wanted them to be is confident over everything else, as obviously as well as a decent human being. So that bit I'll take as a given. But I think where it's really helped me positively is the ability to influence your earnings by working hard and appreciating that every single pound you earn was something you could use to benefit your life. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of people out there that will have the opportunity to earn more money and they won't take it. And I just simply to this day, I can't understand it. And I think if you have the desire to work harder, that will open up opportunities for yourself. And what that then did for me is that opened up access to people. And the people that it opened up access were the people that wanted to better themselves. And therefore, I started to learn from them. And I think one of the challenges that you'll know very well is the role models you get access to from low socio-economic backgrounds might not be the ones that can develop you at speed. And if you listen to any of the leadership coaches or gurus, even though he says he's not a guru, Tony Robbins said, if you want to learn karate or kung fu, you can go down to your local centre, and I'm sure it's very good in St Neots or in London, and you can go down there and someone will teach you. However, if you go to the top grandmaster on planet Earth in Japan or Taiwan or wherever they're based, you're arguably going to learn quicker, faster, and better. And I think for me, that's the bit now that coming from that background, I didn't know it at the time, but the work ethic opened me up. And now I've realized that everything is teachable, and the better teachers you have, the quicker you learn. Unfortunately, typically they cost money.
Yeah.
Actually, if you want to do it, you can go and earn the money by prioritizing it above other things, and then you can learn it and you can learn it faster.
Or you can come to the channel community and we provide free of charge mentoring to people that don't have access to it. So there is an alternative out there now, which was, again, one of the fundamental reasons for creating it, is about not everyone can afford it or has access to it. So there's a whole community of individuals, both channel buddies and just members, that are willing to help and support that next generation. So hopefully we can do the best we can.
Yeah, and that's something I think is phenomenal. I do it internally within this business, and I think unlocking the potential that's within people is incredibly profound.
No, absolutely. And very rewarding as well. Selfishly, very rewarding.
100%.
So, knowing what you know now and everything that you've achieved, what would you say to a younger version of Mark?
Oh, what would I say? I think I'd say everything happens for a reason, even if at the time you don't know what that reason is. So just roll with it. As we've talked about, life lessons often happen through adversity, not positive experiences. My grandfather used to say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I don't think I appreciated the wisdom in what he meant. And you talked earlier about failing if you're going to fail fast. And I didn't want to fail ever until I worked for Samsung, and you were never penalized for failure. You were penalized for not making decisions, sitting on the fence. And for me, what I learned is your brain and body cannot differentiate between reality, a memory, or a forward-looking vision. Therefore, all makes it real. So I used to ruminate terribly. I couldn't sleep. I used to be terrified about all these things that can happen. But reframing that, I think Dyson's one of the most famous examples. He had something like 5,037 prototypes before the Dyson that made his name a household name.
Yeah.
It's not a failure. It's a prototype that you've got better and better and better. And I think if you look at where I come from, I would have said, oh, you've done it once, it's failed, don't do it again. but I think for him, they're just iterations that made his product better and stronger. So I think that's what I'd say to myself. Don't fear the failure, just roll with it. And what can you learn from it?
Absolutely. I love this. I say that to fail is the first attempt in learning. So that's all it
Oh,
is.
yeah, I like that.
There you go. What support and help do you think companies could be doing to help individuals from a low social economic background?
I think you, the clue is in the question. If we restated it slightly and we added in, I think, education to it, because one of the things that I saw a post yesterday, and it's from the former CRO of Gone, and she said there's far too much focus given to academic qualifications and filtering of people by degree, particularly in the States, but I've seen it a lot in the UK. And I know because you said that education wasn't your strong point and forte growing up, but actually, if you look at people, I think Stephen Bartlett from Dragon's Den Diary CEO is someone who's regularly on my feeds, and Stephen says that what by filtering by academic qualifications, you are creating a bias, and that filters out talented candidates. And I think I'd recommend schools they have outreach programs to spot raw talent at an early age and then create opportunities to harness this and funnel into a business, because we've had some people that join our business and they are world class if you measure them solely by academic qualifications, but they won't get through the door. And I think for me that's a huge one, because typically those from a low social economic background don't often have the highest education, albeit that's not self included, that's not a hard and fast rule.
No, absolutely. That's a really great piece of advice. And lastly, my last question, what one piece of advice would you give to someone from a low social economic background who is trying to navigate a career in the channel?
Oh, great question. Don't live in your own head. I've seen so many people that have lived in their own head that have limited themselves. And I'll give you an example that springs to mind. There was a salesperson. We were asked by a head of business, you need to get people to attend this customer event, and I'm getting repeatedly kicked by the sales director because we have poor attendance at this event. And I asked one of my strong salespeople and said, listen, you've got no attendees. He said, my customers won't come. They're not interested. They're not going to come to this event, Mark. Stop putting the pressure on. And we did a couple of things. We put in an incentive, but we also put in a disincentive to drive attendance. I had a team of 12 people. This guy said, I won't get anyone there. 50% of attendance at the entire event came from this guy's team. And it
Wow.
knocked him for six, because in his head, he'd made the decision on behalf of his customers without even asking them. And I've got so many examples, not just myself, but of others, where you have that fear of failure and you go and make decisions for it, but actually try it. You said earlier, one of the primary advantages of coming from an affluent background or a private education is that inbred confidence that's indoctrinated into people at a young age. Things like public speaking in school, things that perpetuate people that failure is not failure, it's the first step of learning, and secondly, if you get it wrong, it's not a problem, but also they learn that to overcome that fear. And I think there's so many people that come in that will have a career, and that career is either paused or slowed down by having a handbrake on because they're living in their own head.
Yeah. What great advice. Mark, you have well and truly smashed the class ceiling. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you very much for the invite.
No, it's been great. Thank you.